The desperate contract in the year 2347. Earth was a shadow of its former self. Its economy had collapsed for the seventh time that century, and no one knew if it could ever recover. People lived in the wreckage of failed governments and broken promises. With resources running out and life growing harsher by the day, humanity had to look beyond Earth for survival. Darren, a young man just trying to survive, found himself standing in a long, crowded line outside a crumbling government building in New York. His clothes were worn, his face tired. He had heard whispers of jobs beyond Earth, but the idea of leaving his home was terrifying. What if he never came back? What if the aliens didn't like humans? What if he was just a tool for their use? But these thoughts were far from his mind now. The real problem was survival. The job postings were scattered across the city like scraps of paper, each one offering a way out. One job in particular caught Darren's eye. It was from an organization called Interstellar Employment, and it promised food, shelter, and a chance at something better. It was vague, but it didn't matter. Darren didn't have time to question things. There was no choice. He signed the contract without reading the fine print. A quick glance was all it took. He was in. The contract was simple. Work for an alien. Race on their planet for 5 years. In exchange, they would provide him with food, a place to live, and the opportunity to make a life. He thought it was a typical office job. Perhaps he'd be answering emails, doing some translations, or helping organize their events. Nothing too complicated, just a steady job. He didn't even consider the possibility of leaving Earth behind, forever. The next day, Darren found himself aboard a transport ship heading toward an unknown planet. His stomach churned with both fear and excitement. The journey to the planet Uvan would take months. He tried to distract himself with thoughts of what the job would be like. Would he be alone? Would the aliens be friendly? What kind of work would he be doing? As the ship hummed through space, Darren's mind raced. He had no idea what to expect, but it had to be better than the struggle he faced back on Earth. Every passing day was a reminder of the collapse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ship landed. The air smelled different here. It was fresh, almost sweet, and the sky had a soft purple hue unlike anything Darren had ever seen. The land stretched out before him, dotted with strange glowing trees and winding rivers that shimmered in the light. It was like stepping into another world. Darren stepped off the ship, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, silvery grass. A group of tall, slender aliens waited for him, their silver skin catching the light. Their faces were serene, their eyes deep and reflective. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, Darren felt a little uneasy. He wasn't sure if he should be excited or terrified. The tallest of the aliens, a woman with high cheekbones and silver eyes, stepped forward. She spoke in a language Darren didn't understand, her voice melodic but foreign. The others around her murmured softly, their voices blending in harmony. Then with a soft smile, she switched to English. "You are most welcome, Darren of Earth," she said, her voice calm and inviting. "I am Valeri, your coordinator. We are honored you accepted our invitation. Few humans meet the requirements." Darren blinked. Requirements? What was she talking about? Before he could ask, Valerie smiled again and gestured for him to follow her. She led him through the village, a place unlike any Darren had ever imagined. It was peaceful, almost dreamlike. The buildings were made from living trees that seemed to grow into structures, their branches twisting in beautiful patterns. The streets were lined with glowing vines and the entire village seemed to hum with energy. Everything is different here, Darren thought to himself, but despite the beauty, a sense of unease lingered. As they walked, Valeri explained the basic rules of his stay. He would be working as a village integration liaison, helping the Varnari understand the humans who might one day come to live here. It sounded easy enough, and for a moment Darren felt reassured. This was just a cultural exchange. He had done similar work back on Earth. But something wasn't right. Darren couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the job than Valeri was letting on. The village was quiet, almost too quiet. The Varnari were kind, but their silence spoke volumes. The way they observed Darren, always smiling but never speaking too much, made him wonder if they were waiting for something, waiting for him. At last, Valerie led Darren to a building that looked more like a temple than a house. It had high ceilings and flowing water channels along the floor. The bed inside was unlike anything Darren had ever seen. It looked like it had grown from a single tree, its roots twisted and smooth. Valerie handed him a small tablet. "Your purpose here is sacred," she said softly, her eyes meeting his, with an intensity he hadn't expected. "You must first undergo cleansing." Darren raised an eyebrow. Cleansing? He had no idea what that meant. But Valerie's expression made it clear that this was not a request. He didn't have time to ask questions. The cleansing would begin tomorrow. As Darren unpacked his few belongings, the weight of his decision began to settle in. What had he signed up for? Why did they say few humans met the requirements? What exactly was his purpose here? Theo? Varnari didn't seem dangerous, but their quiet eyes and strange ways made Darren uneasy. The contract had promised a better life, but Darren was starting to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. He sat down on the strange bed, staring out at the glowing village. He was here now. There was no turning back. Whatever the Varnari wanted, he would find out soon enough. The contract was signed and his new life had begun. The cleansing ritual. The morning after his arrival, Darren woke to find the village quieter than ever. The strange hum of the air that had filled the valley the day before had faded. The trees shimmered a little less brightly, and the golden rivers that wound through the land seemed to flow slower, more deliberately. The peace was unnerving, as though the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for something. Valerie arrived at his quarters just as the first rays of the violet sun pierced the sky. Her silver eyes gleamed with an unreadable expression, her lips curving into a soft, welcoming smile. "It is time for your cleansing," she said in her calm, melodic voice. "Follow me." Darren followed her through the village, still processing everything she had said the day before. Cleansing. He had assumed it would be some sort of physical checkup, a form of medical examination to ensure he was fit for the job. After all, it was just a bureaucratic job, wasn't it? But as they walked deeper into the village, the path became less familiar, winding toward a secluded area where Darren had never been before. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of something sweet and pungent. Glowing vines wrapped around, the trunks of towering trees casting eerie shadows that stretched unnaturally long. The ground here was soft, almost spongy under his feet. Darren felt his heart quicken as they entered a circular clearing, where a large stone structure sat in the center, covered in bioluminescent moss that pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is where it will begin," Valerie said, her tone now serious, almost ceremonial. She turned toward Darren, her silver eyes narrowing. "You must trust us, Darren. This ritual is essential." Darren's throat tightened. Something about the place was unsettling. The very air felt charged, as if every step he took carried him deeper into a hidden truth he wasn't ready to uncover. "You will be cleansed inside and out," Valerie continued, her voice steady. "It will prepare you for your sacred role. The process is necessary for both you and the village." Darren didn't know what to say. He hadn't signed up for anything this elaborate. He had no idea what they meant by inside and out, but as he looked around, he had the distinct feeling that there were things happening here, things that went far beyond the job he had signed up for. Without another word, Valerie gestured toward a smooth, round basin in the center of the clearing. Steam rose from the surface of the water inside, thick and fragrant. The smell was intoxicating, like fresh flowers, honey, and something earthy, like wet soil after a rainstorm. It made his head swim. "Step forward," she instructed, her eyes unwavering. Darren hesitated. He had expected a simple process, a medical exam perhaps, some basic customs, but this was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It didn't feel like a job, it felt like an offering, a ceremony. Slowly, he stepped forward, his breath shallow, every instinct telling him to turn back. But he was already here. There was no escape now. As he lowered himself into the basin, the warm water embraced him like a living thing. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. Soft, smooth, yet tingling with an energy that surged through his body. His muscles relaxed against the water's pull, his mind hazy. A strange warmth spread from his chest to his limbs, and his heart began to beat faster, erratically, as though the water was sinking with his very pulse. The steam surrounding him grew thicker, wrapping around his head like a fog. He couldn't breathe it in fast enough. Every breath seemed to be pulling him deeper into a state of bliss, of awareness. As the minutes passed, Darren began to feel different. His body seemed to be responding to the water in ways he couldn't understand. His senses heightened. The air tasted sharper. The faint scent of flowers now mingled with a strange metallic taste in his mouth. His skin tingled, and with each passing second, he felt stronger, more alert. Valerie watched him with quiet intensity from the side, her arms folded across her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence of the moment, the intensity of the ritual, was enough to fill the air with tension. After what felt like hours, Darren emerged from the basin, his body slick with the strange, glowing oils they had used. His skin had taken on a subtle shimmer, and his muscles felt unusually tense yet flexible, like he could move faster and more precisely than ever before. He didn't understand what had just happened to him, but he could feel it. Something had shifted inside him. "You are ready," Valerie said quietly, her gaze meeting his with an unreadable expression. "Ready for what?" Darren asked, his voice hoarse, more confused than ever. She smiled, the edges of her lips curling slightly. "Your role as the seed-bearer. Your purpose is now clear." The words hit Darren like a punch. Seed-bearer. He had heard that term before, but the meaning didn't click until now. His mind raced, trying to process the implications. What had he signed up for? Before he could ask another question, Valerie gestured for him to follow her again. She led him back through the village, her pace quick and confident. Darren's thoughts were a blur. The strange sensations still rippled through his body. He had never felt more alive, but at the same time he had never felt more trapped. As they passed through the village, Darren couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching him. The Varnari moved with a silent grace, their eyes following him like shadows in the periphery. They didn't speak, but there was a shared understanding in their gazes, as if they knew something Darren didn't. Finally, they arrived at a large, open space where several Varnari women waited, their expressions serene. They didn't smile, but their eyes held something almost inviting. "Your cleansing is complete," Valerie said. "Now, the true work begins." Darren stood at the threshold, his heart pounding in his chest. What had he just become a part of? What was this sacred role they kept speaking of? He wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But somehow he couldn't move. The cleansing had changed him, had prepared him. But for what? And then, as if they had all been waiting for him to ask, Valerie finally spoke the words that would shatter his fragile understanding of everything he had known. "You are to be the father of our future, Darren. You will restore our race. You are the key." Darren's blood ran cold. This wasn't a job. This was a trap. The shocking revelation, Darren's body still buzzed with the strange energy from the cleansing. The warmth lingered, radiating from his skin, making him feel like he was glowing from the inside out. Every step he took felt more precise, his senses sharper than they had ever been. He couldn't explain it. The sense of power, the awareness that he was no longer the same man who had arrived on this planet just days ago. But there was something else gnawing at him, something deep within that made his stomach twist in knots. As he followed Valerie through the village, her steady footsteps echoed on the soft earth beneath them. She was talking, but Darren wasn't listening. His mind was still reeling from the ritual. He had expected something different, a quick job, a few weeks of bureaucratic work, and then a return to Earth. But now he wasn't so sure he would ever leave this place. Valerie's voice brought him back to reality. "Your cleansing has prepared you for your purpose," she said, her eyes fixed ahead. "You will now begin your sacred role as the seed-bearer." Darren stopped walking, his mind struggling to keep up with her words. "Seed-bearer?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, her silver eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Yes. The Varnari have reached a point where our survival depends on you, Darren. Your role is not just important, it is vital." His chest tightened. You mean to tell me that I'm here to reproduce with your people?" His words felt like a punch, as if saying them aloud would make the reality hit harder. Valerie nodded. "Yes. You are the key to restoring our race. Your DNA is compatible with ours in a way that no other species is. You will father many children with our people, ensuring that we can thrive again." Darren stared at her, his mind scrambling for words. This wasn't the job he had signed up for. He hadn't expected any of this. He had imagined himself helping to set up a few festivals, perhaps translating some documents. But this was something entirely different. "How many children?" he asked, his voice trembling despite his efforts to stay calm. Valerie didn't hesitate. 200. Darren's heart stopped. 200 children. The weight of her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. He had heard rumors about species trying to preserve themselves, but he hadn't imagined it would be like this. A contract for reproduction, not for labor. That's insane," Darren muttered, his hands trembling at his sides. "Insane?" Valerie asked, tilting her head slightly. "To ensure the survival of a species? To bring new life into the world? It is necessary. For you, and for us." Darren's mind raced. This was not just a job anymore. He had become a tool, a vessel for their survival. But why? Why choose him? There had to be something more to it. "Why me?" he asked, his voice raw with confusion. "Why did you choose a human? Why not another species?" Valerie's gaze softened, her expression almost sympathetic. "The Varnari are a dying species, Darren. Our genetic pool has narrowed dangerously. We no longer have enough diversity to survive on our own. Only a few species are genetically compatible with us. And your species, you are uniquely suited to restore our strength." Darren could feel the pressure of her words pushing in on him. His mind swirled. Genetically compatible? That didn't explain everything. There was something more, something deeper, that he hadn't yet uncovered. Valerie continued, her voice growing more serious. "You may not understand yet, but you will. Your DNA holds the potential to reinvigorate our race, to bring back the genetic diversity we have lost over millennia. Your children will be stronger, healthier. They will carry the future of the Varnari." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in before adding, "But it is not just the physical children we need. We need your essence, your connection to the world you come from. Your presence here will change us." Darren felt a cold chill run down his spine. My essence? What did that mean? And why did the word change seem so significant? Something was off. The Varnari were not just asking for children. They were asking for something else, something Darren couldn't quite put his finger on. Before he could ask any more questions, Valeri's expression hardened. "It is time for you to begin," she said, her voice no longer soft, but authoritative. "Your first ritual will start tonight." The word ritual struck Darren like a blow to the chest. Ritual? What kind of ceremonies had he signed up for? His stomach twisted with unease, but he didn't have the luxury of refusing. He had already signed the contract. He was bound to this place, to these people, for 5 years. And now he had no choice but to play his part. "Follow me," Valeri said, turning and leading him deeper into the village. As they walked, Darren, couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on him. He had become something else, something more than human. He wasn't just a worker. He wasn't just a contract employee. He was something vital to the survival of an entire alien race. The village seemed different now, quieter, as though every Varnari was watching him, waiting for him to fulfill his purpose. He had been thrust into the center of their world, and there was no escape. They arrived at a large, open pavilion, surrounded by tall trees and lit by the soft glow of bioluminescent flowers. Several Varnari women stood inside, their eyes fixed on Darren with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Each of them looked different, their features unique, but all shared the same serene, unreadable expressions. "Your partners," Valeri said, gesturing to the women. "These are the ones with whom you will begin your task." Darren's breath caught in his throat. Partners? His mind was too overwhelmed to process the full extent of what was happening. All he could focus on was the sick feeling building in his stomach. "Tonight we begin the first ceremony," Valeri continued. "Do not worry. It will be sacred. It will be beautiful. And you will play your part with honor." Darren wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But he was trapped, bound, by the contract he had signed, bound by the expectations of the Varnari. His life, his body, his very essence had become theirs to control. And as the women moved closer, Darren's heart pounded with fear and confusion. He had no idea what was coming next, but he could feel it in his bones. This was only the beginning. The ceremony of life. The night was unlike anything Darren had ever experienced. The air was thick with anticipation, the quiet hum of the village replaced by a strange, rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from the very ground beneath his feet. The soft glow of bioluminescent plants lit the paths leading to the pavilion, casting eerie shadows that stretched long and dark. There was a sense of weight in the air, like the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. Darren's heart was pounding in his chest. He had no idea what to expect from this first ceremony, but after everything he had learned in the past few days, he was no longer sure he wanted to find out. The Varnari had made it clear. His role was no longer just about helping them. He wasn't just here for integration or cultural exchange. He was their seed-bearer, and tonight would mark the beginning of that new, terrifying reality. As he walked toward the pavilion, Valeri was by his side, her presence calming, but her eyes unwavering. "You must not fear what is to come, Darren," she said softly, almost as though sensing the anxiety that was brewing inside him. "This ceremony is for the good of both our species. It is a sacred bond, one that has existed for generations." Darren didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too consumed by his thoughts, his fears, his confusion. This was wrong. This wasn't the job he had signed up for, and yet, here he was. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, as if his feet were sinking into the very earth beneath him. When they reached the pavilion, Darren was greeted by the soft hum of a song that seemed to emanate from nowhere. It was a beautiful sound, filled with harmonies that made his skin prickle. The Varnari women were already gathered, their forms glowing faintly in the dim light. They stood in a circle, their eyes locked on Darren, their expressions calm and serene. But there was something unnerving about the stillness in the air. They weren't just waiting for him to take part in the ceremony. They were waiting for him to transform into something else. Valeri stepped forward, turning to face Darren. "You are about to become one with our people," she said, her voice reverberating with the same quiet authority that had defined her from the start. "The ceremony is not just physical, it is spiritual. You will give a part of yourself to us, to our future." Darren's throat tightened. "A part of myself?" he repeated, barely able to speak the words. He wanted to ask more, wanted to demand answers, but something in Valeri's expression told him there was no room for questions here. He had agreed to this, and now there was no turning back. With a swift motion, Valeri gestured for him to join the circle of women. Each one stood in silence, their eyes glowing, their faces serene but unreadable. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and Darren felt a chill crawl down his spine. Every part of him screamed to run to escape this place, but his body betrayed him, moving toward them as if drawn by an invisible force. The first woman stepped forward. She was tall, with long, flowing silver hair and eyes that reflected the light in a way that made her seem almost otherworldly. She smiled at him, a soft, gentle smile, and extended her hand. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation, just calm acceptance. "This is the first step," she said, her voice like liquid silk. "Trust the ceremony. Trust the bond." Darren didn't know what she meant, but he found himself reaching out, his hand shaking as he touched hers. The moment their skin made contact, something shifted. It wasn't just physical. It was a deep, almost primal connection that surged through him, taking over every part of his being. His heart raced, and his thoughts became clouded. The air grew warmer, thicker, and the voices of the other women around him seemed to fade into the background, their melodic song now a haunting echo. He pulled his hand back, his chest tight with panic. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Valerie stepped forward, her eyes filled with something Darren couldn't place, a mixture of pride and something darker, more calculating. "You are awakening, Darren. You are beginning to understand your purpose." The second woman stepped forward then, her expression soft but firm. She was different from the others. Her features were sharper, more defined, and her eyes held a quiet intensity that made Darren's breath catch. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but unyielding. "This is your gift to us," she said. "Not just children, but the essence of your spirit. You will give us not just your body, but your strength, your vitality. Your energy will flow through us and through our children. Your legacy will live on in them." Darren's pulse thundered in his ears. Essence of your spirit? What were they asking of him? He was just a man, a human from Earth. He wasn't some sacred being, some conduit for the survival of an entire species. But as he looked into the eyes of the women, he felt a pull, a need that he couldn't explain. It was as if a part of him had already been claimed, already marked for something far beyond his control. The first woman stepped forward again, her eyes searching his. "Do you understand now, Darren? This is not just a job. This is your destiny. You will shape the future of our people, carry the weight of our survival." His mind was in turmoil. Was this what they had meant when they said he would be the key? Had he really understood what he had signed up for? Or had he been too desperate to see what lay hidden beneath the surface? Before he could answer, Valerie stepped in, her voice calm, but there was a steel in it now. "The ceremony will begin. Your role is sacred, and you will carry it out." The women gathered around him, forming a perfect circle, their eyes locked on him. A soft light emanated from their bodies, casting an ethereal glow across the pavilion. The air grew thick with anticipation. Darren felt a cold sweat on his brow, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. As the first woman stepped forward again, she placed her hand on his chest. "We give you this gift," she said softly. "In return, we ask for a part of you, a bond, a connection." The world seemed to tilt, and for the first time Darren understood the full weight of his contract. He wasn't just here to help the Varnari. He wasn't just here to translate, to assist. He was here to become part of them, to serve as a vessel for something far greater than he had ever imagined. As the first touch of the ceremony began, Darren's mind flashed back to Earth. He thought of his family, his home, the world he had left behind. But that world felt so distant now, a fading memory. Here, in this moment, in this alien place, he was no longer Darren of Earth. He was something else entirely. And with that realization, the ceremony began. The children of Uvan. The days blurred together after the first ceremony. Darren had expected things to settle, but they only grew more intense. The rituals became a regular part of his existence. Every other week, A new ceremony, a new partner, a new offering of himself. But it was never just the physical act. Each time the bond seemed to grow deeper, stronger, as if a part of him was being pulled into something much larger than he could control. It wasn't just his body that changed, it was his mind, his very essence. The Varnari had said they would bond with him, and each time it happened it felt like his thoughts and emotions became more entwined with theirs. He could feel their presence even when they weren't around, a constant quiet hum in the back of his mind. But it was the children that began to change everything. Darren hadn't thought much about them at first. After all, he had been told they were his offspring, part of a necessary process to ensure the survival of the Varnari species. They were just children. His children. Or so he had convinced himself. It wasn't until the 6th month that he began to notice something strange. He had been walking through the village one evening, lost in thought, when he passed by a small building on the edge of the settlement. It wasn't large or impressive, but there was something different about it. The air around it was heavy, thick with a kind of anticipation like something was stirring just beneath the surface. He couldn't explain why, but something compelled him to walk inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, he felt it, the silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of the village that he had grown used to. This was something else. It was a quiet that felt too still, too careful, as if everyone inside was waiting for something to happen. And then he saw them. At first, it was the eyes that caught his attention, the children. They were so different from the adults, but they had the same eyes, silver and liquid, bright but with an intensity that felt unnatural. Their skin was softer than the adults, a pale silver with faint streaks of brown in their hair, and their faces, though young, held an unmistakable recognition. These weren't just any children. These were his children, his offspring. At least that's what he told himself. The caretaker, an older Varnari woman with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through him, approached. "These are yours," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Darren's throat tightened. "All of them?" The woman nodded. "All of them. You've sired 38 so far." 38. The number took Darren's breath away. It was one thing to hear it, another thing entirely to see them, to see his children. These beautiful silver-skinned beings, all growing, all watching him with those strange, knowing eyes. A wave of guilt washed over him. How could he have done this? How could he have been a part of something so clinical, so detached? He had been caught up in the rituals and the ceremonies, but now that he saw them, saw his children, it was different. They were real. They were alive. And they were looking at him, reaching out for him, as if they knew who he was. The caretaker noticed his discomfort. "They are strong," she said softly. "Your children have the potential to carry the future of the Varnari. They are a gift, not just from you, but to you. A gift." The words rang in his ears like an echo of something darker, something he wasn't ready to face. How could this be a gift? This wasn't his choice. He hadn't asked for any of this. He hadn't even known what he was signing up for when he first boarded the ship to Uvan. "I didn't sign up for this," Darren muttered under his breath, his voice hoarse with a mixture of frustration and confusion. "I didn't know." The caretaker's gaze softened, but there was an intensity in her eyes that stopped him cold. "You may not have known," she said, "but you are here now. And here, you have become part of us. Whether you accept it or not, these children are yours. They carry your blood, your legacy, and we will raise them with the honor they deserve." Darren turned away from her, his thoughts spinning. He didn't know how to process this. He had been told that he was a tool for their survival, a vessel for their species. But seeing his children, their innocent faces, their reaching hands, shattered the illusion. These were not just children. They were the future of the Varnari, and they were his responsibility. Suddenly, a voice broke through his thoughts. "Do you want to hold one?" The caretaker asked, her tone soft but insistent. Before he could protest, she took a small child from the group and placed it in his arms. It was a strange feeling, The child was light, almost fragile, but its skin was warm against his, and its eyes locked onto his with a clarity that unsettled him. There was something ancient in the gaze of this child, something knowing, as though it understood more than a newborn should. Darren stared down at the child, its small hands reaching up to touch his face, its silver eyes wide and curious. For the first time since arriving on Uvon, he felt a pang of something deep inside him, something that didn't feel like fear, but like an overwhelming sense of attachment. The child smiled, a soft, innocent smile that made his chest ache. What had he done? The weight of it all settled on him in that moment. He was no longer just a human stranded on an alien planet. He was a father. He had fathered dozens of children with these people, and now he had to live with the consequences. These children were his legacy, just as much as they were the Varnari's. Darren's chest tightened. He had become part of their culture, part of their survival, whether he wanted to or not. The Varnari had made him a tool, a means to an end. But seeing the child in his arms, seeing the future of the Varnari so innocent, so full of life, something inside him shifted. He couldn't just walk away, could he? The caretaker was watching him, her eyes filled with understanding. "It is not just about survival," she said quietly. "It is about connection. These children are not just your legacy. They are your family now." Darren looked down at the child, its tiny hand still grasping at him. Family. The word echoed in his mind like a secret that had been locked away, hidden deep within him. But the deeper he felt the connection, the more powerful the pull, the more the weight of his situation pressed down on him. He had no idea where this journey would take him, but for the first time, he truly understood the stakes. The choice. Leave or stay. The days following the ceremony had left Darren in a daze, his mind and heart at war with one another. He had been thrust deeper into the Varnari's world than he had ever imagined. His body, mind, and soul pulled in directions he hadn't signed up for. The children, his children, clung to him in ways that made it impossible to ignore the truth of his new reality. He had become not just a contributor to the Varnari's survival, but a central piece of their future, and it terrified him. The village had grown quieter in the past few weeks. Where once it had been filled with harmonious songs, soft laughter, and the sound of the rivers flowing, now there was a hushed tension in the air. The shimmering glow of the trees seemed dimmer. The Varnari walked the streets with purposeful silence, their eyes ever watchful as if waiting for something. The peace that once felt so tranquil now felt like the calm before a storm. Darren found himself wandering more and more, pacing the glowing paths under the pale violet sky, unable to shake the feeling that something was about to happen. There was no real escape. He had signed the contract. He was bound to this world, to this fate. But something inside him began to shift. A seed of rebellion started to grow, fed by the growing unease that had taken root in his chest. He no longer felt like a visitor, an outsider simply fulfilling his role. He felt like a prisoner. One evening he found himself standing at the edge of the village, looking out into the violet fields that stretched out endlessly. The air here was thick with the scent of alien flowers, but all he could smell was the creeping dread in the pit of his stomach. He had to leave. Darren couldn't explain it, but the thought of Earth, of home, of everything he had left behind, clawed at him more fiercely now. He could feel the pull of the place he had once called his own, the warmth of his family, the scent of the familiar air, the memories of his life before he had ever signed that fateful contract. Could he really be a part of this alien race forever? Could he really be the father to hundreds of children who would grow up knowing only this alien world? He had always wanted to help people. He had always thought of himself as someone who could make a difference, even in a small way. But he had never imagined this. He had never imagined becoming part of an alien species, sacrificing everything human about himself for their survival. The wind swept across the fields, pulling at his clothes, as if urging him to move. He couldn't stay here. Not like this. Not with his body bound to their rituals. his mind caught between his humanity and the Varnari's customs. Just as he turned to leave, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Valari. Her presence was always so serene, so calm. But tonight, something was different. Her silver eyes were sharp, almost piercing, and her usually soft smile was replaced by a knowing look. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low and filled with an emotion Darren couldn't quite place. Darren froze. I don't belong here anymore," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "I came here to help, to make a difference. But this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't ask for this life. I didn't ask to be part of your people's future." Valerie stepped closer, her gaze unblinking. "I know what you're feeling, Darren," she said softly. "You're feeling torn. You want to go back to the life you knew, but you are here now. And this place, these people, are your family." Darren shook his head. "No, I don't belong here. I can't just forget who I am, who I was. I need to go back. I need to see my family again, feel the air of Earth again." Valerie's expression softened, but her eyes remained intense. "Your family is here now, Darren. You've created something with us that you cannot undo. The bond you have with our children, with our species, it goes beyond what you understand. You are part of us now. Leaving would tear apart everything you've built, everything we've built." Darren felt a sharp pain in his chest. She was right. The bond between him and the children was undeniable. He had fathered them, taught them, loved them, in his own way. He couldn't just walk away from that. Could he? But the thought of leaving still gnawed at him. It was the only way he could see himself regaining control of his life, of his identity. He had given so much of himself already. But what more could he give? Valari took another step closer, her voice becoming more urgent, more forceful. "You are not a prisoner, Darren. But leaving now would destroy more than you can imagine. It would leave a hole, a fracture. You've become too intertwined with us when with our future. The genetic bond, yes, but more than that. The emotional bond." Darren stared at her, unable to respond. The weight of her words crushed him. What was she saying? What did she mean by emotional bond? She looked at him with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see straight into his soul. "I know you didn't ask for this. I know it feels wrong. But you've already made a choice for us, for our future. You are our elder now, Darren. You are the father of our children, and we are your family." The finality of her words hit Darren like a thunderclap. There was no easy escape, no simple return to Earth. The very fabric of his identity had been woven into theirs, and walking away from it would tear him apart. Emotionally, genetically, spiritually. He had become something other. He had become them. But could he stay? Could he really give up everything for a future with the Varnari? "I can't leave, can I?" Darren whispered, his voice breaking. Valerie's expression softened for the first time in days. She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm, comforting. "No, Darren, you cannot. Not without consequences. But you can stay. You can choose to make this world your home. You can choose to build a future with us, a future that is your own as well as ours." Her words were like chains, slowly pulling him deeper into their world. Darren had known deep down that there was no going back. The moment he had stepped onto Uvan, he had crossed an invisible line. But hearing Valeri's words, hearing her say it out loud, made the truth sink in harder than ever. Darren closed, his eyes, the weight of his decision pressing on him from every side. He couldn't go back to Earth, not anymore. "I'll stay," he said, the words escaping from him before he had time to think. The decision felt final, irreversible. Valerie's smile was gentle, almost relieved. "Then welcome home, Darren." And, as she turned and walked away, Darren stood there, the weight of his choice settling over him. The world of the Varnari was now his world. The future he had once feared was now the only future he knew. A father among the stars, it had been over a year since Darren had made the choice to stay. The world he had once known, Earth, his family, his life, had become a distant memory. There were moments, fleeting seconds, when the weight of his decision would hit him with an overwhelming force, but they were becoming rarer. The people here, the Varnari, had embraced him as one of their own. They had molded him into something new, and in some strange way he had allowed them to. The village of Salve, nestled in the Violet Valley, had grown. More Varnari children filled the streets now, their eyes glowing with that same intensity Darren had first seen in his own offspring. The once quiet, serene community now thrummed with life, and in the center of it all, Darren had become a leader, not just a seed-bearer anymore, but a father. He walked through the village, a little slower than he once had, his heart heavy with the faces of the children who called him Dad. They ran to him now, their voices high-pitched with excitement, their silver skin gleaming like starlight. Their laughter echoed through the air, and as he bent down to pick one of them up, he realized something had changed. He had become a part of them. The Varnari elders had crowned him with the title of village elder after 2 years, a role that he had not asked for but could not refuse. His influence was undeniable now. They sought his wisdom in matters of parenting, education, and even their relationships. His suggestions for changes to the village based on human experiences had reshaped the very fabric of their society. What started as a ceremonial role had evolved into something far deeper. He was no longer an outsider. He had become their father, a vital part of the Varnari's future. But despite the changes in him, despite the growing sense of belonging, Darren could not ignore the feeling of something missing. He had buried his old life deep within him, but as the years passed, Earth seemed to call him from the depths of his soul. It was a faint whisper at first, just a memory of his old life. But it grew stronger, louder, as he watched the children grow. They had become more than his offspring. They were his family. He had bonded with them in a way that transcended biology, and with each passing day he found himself drawn deeper into their world. But with that attachment came a realization. He was not just raising them. He was shaping the future of a species that had once been on the brink of extinction, but now under his guidance was thriving. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant purples and golds, Darren stood at the edge of the village, watching his children play near the river. His mind drifted, as it often did now, to thoughts of Earth. He had promised himself that he would visit again one day, but as time passed, the promise felt more and more like a distant dream. Valerie approached him quietly, her presence as calming as ever. She had been with him through it all, his struggles, his confusion, his acceptance. She had always been the steady hand guiding him through the chaos of his transformation. "You seem distant," she said softly, standing beside him. "Is something troubling you?" Darren turned to her, his expression guarded. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he admitted, his voice strained. "About Earth, about what I left behind." Valerie's silver eyes studied him for a long moment, her face unreadable. "I see. You still miss your home?" He nodded slowly. "I miss it more than I thought I would. But it's not just that. It's the people I left behind, the life I thought I'd return to. But I'm not sure I belong there anymore. I don't know who I am anymore." Valerie's hand gently rested on his shoulder, her voice soft but filled with a knowing wisdom. "You are Darren, the one who gave us life. You are our father, our teacher. Your role here is vital. And though your heart longs for the past, you have created something new, something that never existed before." Darren felt a pang of guilt twist inside him. He loved them. He loved the children, the Varnari. But he had left something behind that could never be reclaimed. It wasn't just his home, his planet. It was the very essence of who he had once been. "I didn't ask for this," he murmured. "I didn't choose this path. I came here as a stranger, looking for something to hold on to. And now I'm everything I never imagined I would be." Valerie smiled gently, the expression filled with a depth that Darren couldn't fully comprehend. But you are exactly who you were meant to be, Darren. You have given us your heart, your strength, and your mind. Your choice to stay was not a mistake. I don't know anymore, Darren admitted. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. These children, they call me Dad. But am I still human? Am I still me? Valerie's voice grew even softer, almost like a whisper. What does it mean to be human, Darren? Is it your blood? Your history? Or is it your capacity to love, to grow, to change? Her words hit him like a wave. He had been so focused on what he had lost that he hadn't considered what he had gained. He had given up one world, one identity, but in return, he had found something deeper, something more profound than he had ever expected. The children began to gather around him, their faces eager and bright. One of them, a little girl with streaks of brown in her hair, ran up to him holding a small flower in her hand. "Dad, look, I found this for you," she said, her voice full of pride as she handed it to him. Darren knelt down, taking the flower from her hands. It was beautiful, delicate petals that shimmered in the moonlight. He smiled, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't name. This was his family now. These children were his legacy, just as much as they were the Varnaris. He had created them, yes, but in return, they had given him something he hadn't known he needed: a purpose. For the first time in a long while, Darren felt the weight of his decision shift from a burden to a blessing. "You've done well, Darren," Valerie said, her voice filled with pride as she watched the children surround him. "You've brought hope not just for us but for the universe. Your choice to stay here, to build this future with us, it was not just the right one, it was your destiny." Darren looked at the faces of the children, his children, and for the first time he realized something profound, and he was not lost. He had found something more than he could have ever imagined. He wasn't just one person anymore. He had become part of something greater. His role here, as a father, a leader, a teacher, it was not a burden. It was a gift. And as he looked out across the glowing fields with the stars above and his children around him, Darren understood. He had become something beyond human. He had become part of the stars themselves.